Welcome everybody to Tuesday, August 8th, 2017, meeting of SIG Service Catalog. Aaron Schlesinger, the meeting is yours to objectively facilitate and otherwise execute speaker queue and so forth.
Cool, thanks Paul. So my normal spiel is as follows. We're going to be doing a speaker queue. I have my high-tech speaker queue equipment ready. If you have something you'd like to add to the conversation, please type in the chat plus hand, like I just did. I have the agenda up. The agenda link is also in the chat right now. I will be taking notes, but I will not be sharing my screen. So if someone else would like to, that's totally fine. But otherwise, this is a live updating document, so you can easily pull it up on your own machine and see my notes as I type them. So with that, we're going to start with the first item on the list under August 8th, 2017, and that is from Paul Morey, talking about issue number 1098, the proposal for the scope of the initial beta release. So Paul, go ahead and take the floor. And you can start talking about the background for this issue.
Okay, I'm just clearing off some stuff from a screen so I can share it. Fantastic. It is truly impressive how poor Zoom is at screen sharing. Amazing. Truly amazing. All right, let me kill some more windows. Okay, can folks share my screen? Oh, well, hey, maybe if the window that I wanted to share was actually running, that would have been a better choice. And now I can't stop sharing my screen, which is interesting. Okay. Just a reminder to everybody, this is occurring in the year 2017. All right, so I will go ahead and open this up. We started talking about this a week ago, I believe. So I believe it was August 1st that we introduced this as a discussion topic, what the scope of beta could be. And there have not been a lot of people commenting on the issue. So I thought we could perhaps take one more round of questions if there are any. And if there aren't, it sounds like we have consensus on what the scope should be. So I wonder if anybody, and I will go ahead and pull this up, if anybody has specific things that they can point to that are not in this list, or things that they can point to that are in this list that they don't think are a requirement for the initial beta release.
So this would be a good time if you have something to say, put a hand in the chat. This is the time for all of us to object or add something to the list if we need to. If we don't have any objections, then we're going to reach consensus on this, and I'll take that as a note in the meeting notes. So if you've got something to say, please put a hand up in the chat, and we'll execute the speaker queue as normal. So Doug, you've got a hand up. Go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what people thought about the kube control plugins. I don't think they're a requirement for beta. I think it's a nice to have, but I just wanted to mention it, see if other people had different thoughts on that one.
So Doug, why don't you explain in like a sentence or two what you mean by kube control plugins?
Right, so recently kube control added the ability to define, in essence, plugins. So you can define new top-level commands. So for example, Simon, who's technically on vacation and Morgan's taking over for him, has been working on some kube control commands where you could say something sort of like kube control instance create, for example, and then give all the parameters on the command line rather than having to give the YAML or JSON and it would, under the covers, do all that magic for you. It's just to make a nicer user experience. But as I said, I think those are probably nice to have and not requirements for beta. But I just wanted to mention in case someone thinks that we actually do need that for beta.
Okay. Paul, you have your hand up. Take the floor, please.
So a couple things. One, Fabiano Franz, who's the SIG CLI lead, has been apparently in parallel doing some design on CLI stuff. So Morgan and Fabiano should talk to one another. Second, I don't think this should be a requirement for an initial beta release. That doesn't mean that we have to wait until GA to do it. And if it were released, or if we had something that people wanted to use, I think that would be great. I do think that we have a lot of design problems that are requirements that we should allocate discussion bandwidth to before we take up the problem of what the CLI extensions should look like. So EOF.
Okay. Vile, you're next up on the queue, so go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, so I agree on the CLI side not being necessary for the beta. We're gonna go and ship it, say, week 2 later, and it'd be fine. API getting that shape is the biggest concern I have because that is the one thing we cannot change easily. The second thing is this list are all the things that we have in this list what we call P0s, aka must ship, or are there things like that are P0, P1s like nice have? So whatever the convention is, meaning I would like to go ahead and for this thing focus only on things we must ship because time is running short. And we need to get something out the door. And I would like to go and make sure that we are very aggressive in pruning things that are not necessary.
So does anyone have an answer to whether or not these are all P0s or P1s or so on and so forth before we move on in the speaker queue?
It's unclear to me whether I can just talk if this is my topic or whether I have to raise my hand again.
Paul, if you have an answer to Vile's question, you can go ahead and throw in your answer.
Okay, so I believe most of them are P0s. There are a couple that I think are arguable that we don't necessarily need. It might be productive if we think this is fairly representative to have anybody call out if they don't think that one is required, and otherwise treat them all as P0.
Okay, does anybody else have opinions directly related to Vile's question? Going once. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that these are all P0s unless otherwise noted. Is that correct, Paul and Vile? Do you agree? Paul, is that correct?
Yeah, okay. I think that the one that I think may not be required is this last one for bindings, determine whether to send AppGuid. And when I say it's not required, I think there might be an easy thing to do, which would be maybe just don't send it unless someone has a use case that they absolutely need to have it for, in which case I'd love to hear it. I think the rest of it kind of represents the sort of nucleus of what a good open service broker integration was or is for Kubernetes, and then making that API work in a predictable way. Like, for example, handling deletion when an instance has bindings isn't something that the spec I don't think has a perspective on, but I think it would be good to handle. That might be one that I could be convinced is only a P1 though too.
Okay. All right, so I have two more people in the speaker queue. It seems like they're both related to this topic. So I'm going to continue with those two people, and then I am going to propose our consensus at that point. So Niall, you said, I don't think we need it for beta, and I put your hand up for you. So can you please verbalize that and also add some more detail if you have it?
Yeah, it was about the kubectl plugin. So I don't think we need to ship the plugin, that it is required for beta. I'm not even sure what the format of the comments should be, and I'm not convinced that there was an initial implementation of kubectl plugin, and I'm not sure if it is the way it should be. And I think that if we provide anything there, it should be closer to what kubectl provides for the core resources. So yeah, I think it's contradictory feature, and we don't require it for beta.
Okay. Paul, you actually had your hand up as well. So go ahead and take the floor. And yes, we can see your screen, including the comments that you're writing right now.
Insane. Okay. Wow. Zoom. You got to hold on tight because Zoom bucks pretty hard. I don't remember why I had my hand up.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like consensus here is that the list as is all P0s with the possible exception of issue number 818, which is at the bottom of the list of bindings. Vile, I see your hand up now, so let me just finish my sentence and then I'm going to get to you. This is all directly about consensus. So again, what I've heard is that consensus is this scope is fine with the possible exception of removing 818. We are also not going to include kubectl plugins in the list. So again, it would be exactly as is. So Vile, I know that you object to that consensus, so go ahead and take the floor.
I didn't think I was objecting, but my understanding was that yesterday we agreed that we were going to go and ship a UPS broker as is. Like, we need to be able to support being able to go ahead and use legacy services in the form of a UPS, and we were planning on doing it using the existing one. It seems like there's two ways we can go about them. One of them is, yes, for the beta, it ships with the clunky version, which is there is no default plan, but eventually it'll get fixed. Or we can go and try to go and say that, no, for beta, we need to support the default plan. I'm fine with either, and I volunteer to go and take over the implementation of the blah, 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 but the default planning, I can do that. But if we don't need it, then obviously I can do something else. And done.
Okay. So we have this idea of adding support for the UPS, the user-provided service concept on the table. Doug, you're next up in the speaker queue, so go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, I just remembered something. Aaron, what do you guys need relative to TPRs and CRD for the beta?
We need support for it, but it's not a hard requirement for beta.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Okay.
Okay. Paul, you had your hand up, so go ahead and take the floor.
So I think that we should be very careful regarding what Vile has just spoken about. I think that what he's talking about is the feature that we discussed yesterday, where for a service with a single plan, you don't need to specify the plan, and not a more first-class, baked-in idea of user-provided services that exist without a broker to back them.
Okay. Vile, is that right?
Yeah, basically I'm saying that for step 0, we do nothing, which is we basically ship the existing UPS broker as it is. The step 1, which is to simplify the usage of it, you basically don't have to specify the plan called the whatever if there is only one. I would argue that the first one, which is shipping UPS as it exists to support legacy services, is necessary for the beta. I think the second one is absolutely not a P0, but I would like to get it into beta.
Okay. Doug, I'm putting your hand up. Can you please verbalize what you said?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's a hard requirement or not, but I think it'd be really, really nice to get the optional plan stuff into beta. So I'm just agreeing with what Ville was saying. If someone could get it done in time, I'm all for it.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
I don't think that we should prevent anybody from writing code for issue that there's a consensus on, and we have certainly established a very expensive consensus on this one. So I'm all for it going in. I think it's a nice to have, and yeah, I think I'm just echoing what people have said. Ville told me he's very interested in working on that one, and since he has previous experience writing emission controllers, I would imagine he can probably get it done pretty quickly.
Okay. So what I'm hearing on consensus now is that, again, the list as is, potentially to be decided later, leaving out 818. Also shipping the UPS broker as the solution for user-provided services, and potentially adding optional plan to the beta. Does anybody disagree with that? Going once. Okay, all right, give me 1 second. I'm gonna write in that consensus here before we move on to timelines. Alrighty. So let's move on to the second subpoint of this issue number 1098, and that is of timelines. So Paul, do you want to repeat what you said about timelines earlier in this meeting?
I'm not sure what I said earlier. On a second. Let's see here. Okay. So can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So I think there's a lot of interest in the community in this project. And one of the motivating factors to get to beta is that a lot of users will just not use APIs that aren't at beta yet. And we've had this project in incubation now for, if I remember correctly, like 10 months. I think it would be great if we had an initial beta release by the time that Kubernetes 1.8 shipped. And so before we talk about ancillary effects of that and like other timelines connected with that, I wanted to gauge the level of interest in having something by Kubernetes 1.8.
Paul, why don't you mention when Kubernetes 1.8 is?
I will get all of that information, which I've collected into a gist, but I need to unshare my screen before I do that. So,
and Paul, are you also, you're referring to having a V1 Beta 1 API object?
V1 Beta 1 API group, yeah. So Kubernetes 1.8 release date is September 26th. And that puts us at like end of September, but not really end. Second to last week in September, last week in September. So that's when Kubernetes 1.8 is.
Okay. Any reactions, comments, questions on that proposed date for beta release? Go ahead now.
I would be happy to ship it by this time, but I don't think it's realistic to expect that we have how many, like 30 issues to be addressed in less than 2 months.
Let's see, I'm counting 9, 17, 24. With the qualification that some of these are already done, like opaque bearer token auth is done. TLS verification of the broker is in progress right now. In fact, there's a PR that's been posted. Creating a new resource for plan also underway.
So in terms of project planning, project management, I'll take over that. Excuse me. I'll take over that responsibility in setting up, making sure the milestones are current and so forth. After we decide on a time, at least at least one time that we would like to get this done by, and I'll make sure that everyone has regular updates on our progress. So first of all, back to your hand, Paul. Doug, I think you have something to say there. I put your hand up for you regarding your +1 comment. So can you please verbalize that?
Yeah, sure. I agree with what Paul's suggesting. Even if we can't make it, I certainly think it's a good idea to try.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it won't be the end of the world if we shoot for that date and we, miss it by a week. I think actually that we have consensus on a lot of this stuff. We tend to spend the most time, obviously, on things that we don't agree about or that aren't obvious as having a single way to skin a cat. But I look at this list, and I think that the resource names are certainly something that is taking quite a bit of discussion. I'm sorry, I'm switching things up. We still have to finalize the names of all the resources. We have to figure out what the Kubernetes names of service class and plan are. And there's been a thread on the mailing list and also cross-posted to the SIG architecture list because it's kind of a problem without precedent in Kubernetes APIs that we have to solve. So those two take a lot of discussion. I don't anticipate the generation stuff being very complex. In fact, I think it will probably be much simpler overall to understand and less code. We already have this resource for plan is in motion, and a number of these other things we have some degree of consensus on, or they're already done, or they're in progress now. For example, I think we have some degree of consensus on everything under brokers. I'm looking at instances, and I think that the parameter stuff is almost in a state where it can be checked in. Orphan mitigation is something that will require discussion, but there are really not very many ways to skin the cat. Plan and parameter updates too, I think are probably going to be fairly easy to talk through. User impersonation is already underway. I think that we have some degree of consensus about when an instance has bindings. This one I also think is very few ways to skin this cat. And likewise, reject plan changes for services that are not plan updatable, also very few ways to skin the cat. And then there's a high degree of overlap with the things we need to do for instances with what we need to do for bindings. So I actually do not think that it's necessarily an insurmountable amount of work. But we definitely tend to spend the most discussion bandwidth on the things that are hardest, which makes sense, right? Like the hardest things take the most discussion, most effort to work through. So I think that this date is doable, and I also can say that Red Hat is adding 2 more engineers to this project to get some of these things that have consensus programmed. So we're interested in staffing this effort to try to make it successful by this day.
Okay. So I have heard, before I move on with the speaker queue, I want to mention I have heard 2 separate tracks. One is what do we want, and the other is what do we think is attainable. So I'd like to try to establish consensus on the former. In a perfect world, does anyone disagree with trying to get a beta 1 out the door by September 26th, 2017? Anyone object to that date?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're establishing the.
I'm talking about what date do we want.
Okay, got it.
So does anyone disagree with trying to hit September 26, 2017 for our V1 Beta 1 release? Niall, do you have something specifically related to our desired date?
Yeah, I just mentioned it above in the chat that like if we want to release beta in sync with 1.8, then we should include rebasing onto 1.8 into.
Okay, let's get to that. Let's get to that in just 1 second. So in terms of just again, I'll repeat, just in terms of what we would like to get to, in terms of a date. Not necessarily all the work that has to go into it, because I know there's a significant amount. But in terms of what we'd like to get to, does anyone disagree with attempting to get to beta 1 by September 26th? Okay, I haven't heard any disagreement for that. So before we move on, I'm going to write a consensus that we all would like to hit beta 1 by 9/26. We haven't yet reached consensus on exactly what that means and exactly if it's achievable. Okay, so Niall, you are next in the speaker queue, so go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, as I mentioned, if we aim for releasing in sync with 1.8, should we add a rebasing onto 1.8 to the scope of beta?
Anybody have?
I have an opinion on that.
Okay.
So I do not think that we should include a rebase unless we discover during implementation of the scope that we've agreed on that we have a dependency on the 1.8 machinery for a particular feature. Right now, I don't think that we do. So right now, I don't think it should be necessary. EOF.
Okay.
I would like to do it shortly afterwards, though. If we hit that date, I would like to rebase on the machinery shortly afterwards.
Okay. So
okay. My only suggestion is that, like, if we need to be closer to the latest release, just to let people depend on both code base of Service Catalog and Kubernetes Core. But it's not a requirement for beta, I agree.
Okay. So Paul, you are also up next on the speaker queue, so please go ahead.
So I have a complementary use case, which is basically the opposite of Null's, is that I would strongly prefer not to have to rebase unless there's a very good technical reason from a feature standpoint it sounds to me like now your requirement comes from, it sounds like you have a vendor directory where you are vendoring catalog in conjunction with the machinery.
Yes.
Okay. So I have like the opposite situation. Is it going to be a blocker if we don't rebase onto 1.8 for you?
I don't know. Like at this point, I can tell that like we had already some blocker bug, for example, which has been fixed in 1.7, and before we made the rebase, we couldn't adopt this fix.
But we don't know of anything in that state with regard to the 1.8 candidate machinery, right? Okay. I think we might want to just play this one by ear. Honestly, the speed of the last rebase was pretty fast if you take out all the time where we didn't actually know what to do with it. So I don't know that would necessarily be too disruptive. I might vote to put that one in a nice to have or play it by ear state.
Okay. Doug, you're up next. Please take the floor.
Yeah, so I was originally going to say that I do agree that it's sort of more in the category of a nice to have. I'm not sure I'd want to necessarily hold up the beta release just for rebase if that was the only thing that was outstanding. But the more I was thinking about it, the more I started thinking that, you know, going to beta is a pretty big deal, and we're purposely trying to align it with the Kubernetes release cycle starting with 1.8. So if we actually do make that date, it might be really nice that we then, from then on, align ourselves with the Kubernetes releases, which means as the next release of Kubernetes goes out, we are rebased on that, and people can use our stuff on the very latest thing. So from that perspective, I'm very much in favor of pushing really, really hard to always be rebased on the latest version of Kubernetes, so that as Kubernetes gets released, we're aligned with it and people can use our stuff with the very latest thing. Because that to me is kind of what beta means, right? It's almost like you're ready to go, almost production ready, and the core infrastructure is set in stone. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to keep up with Kubernetes.
So I'd suggest that, Doug, that's a very good topic, but I'd suggest that we limit this discussion just to what do we need before V1 Beta 1. And Doug, for you to put an item on the agenda for tomorrow about what should we be doing about rebases long term, just to keep this discussion super, super focused on Beta 1. Okay, then just for Beta 1, I'm putting my vote in for rebase if at all possible. Okay. So what I've heard is there seems to be, I may have this wrong, so speak up if I do, there seems to be a consensus on let's try to get a rebase in, but if we don't have it in, then let's prefer to release on the 26th without the rebase. So does anybody...
I had something to say about that, a hypothetical to clarify things.
Is it a disagreement?
It's a... tell you what, I could have said it by now. How about I just say it?
Okay, well, you're next in the speaker queue, so go ahead.
Okay, so we could say that it's September 25th. 1.8 is delayed. I think that if and everything else is done and in good shape except for machinery, I would be in favor in that case of cutting a beta 1, like 0.1.0, and in the next week, cutting 0.1.1, which is rebased onto the machine. I don't think that unless we have a specific gap for a functional element that we need as a requirement, I don't think that we should hold it up on the rebase.
So let me interrupt real quick. So just for this, purely to get consensus here. So if we release a V1 Beta 1 without the Kate's 1.8 API machinery, I've heard consensus, I think that that's okay. Is that accurate? Does anybody disagree with that? Going once?
Say one more time, Aaron, sorry.
So if we were to release a V1 Beta 1 without Kate's 1.8 API machinery rebased into our code base, then that's okay.
If we have to, sure. If that's the only outstanding issue, yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is put right here where I'm typing gibberish. It doesn't show up yet. So under the consensus previously, the first beta, under any objections to the proposed scope, I'm going to put optional a rebase for Kate's 1.8, but we're not going to hold up a release if that's the only thing left.
Sounds good to me.
Doug, thoughts? Anybody else thoughts?
Oh, seems okay for now.
Okay. Hold on one sec while I write that in.
That is really weird that we don't see it on Paul's screen as you're typing. That's bizarre.
You don't see it? I see it.
Yeah, I didn't
There
for
it
the
is.
longest time, and then all of a sudden just appeared. It's very weird.
It must be raining in the internet.
All right. So I've typed up the consensus. Vile, you're next in the speaker queue, so go ahead and take the floor.
So I just had a quick question about, I just want to understand, and feel free to say, don't worry about it, on sort of kind of the moving in the CDRs and how does that relate to 1.8? And that's the first question, is there any impact on that? The second question is, if we, at what point do we take on the burden of migrating from TPRs to CDRs? I assume that's post-beta, but when we release, say, TPR resources in the beta, that means that we take on the burden of eventually converting them to CDRs. Is that correct?
And
Even though you didn't type it, I'll let you go ahead. Yeah.
so TPR, I guess, was technically beta, if I remember correctly, but it was Bino, beta in name only. And I don't think that we should ever take on the burden of migrating from TPR to CRD. That's my own personal opinion.
So I will mention that in the documentation for the TPR storage backend, we do indicate that it's a purely alpha storage backend and could significantly change. I believe we say could significantly change or disappear at any time. Just a note from our docs.
Right. So my understanding, so sorry again, just to continue since I made the question. So my understanding is once a software is shipped to beta in Kubernetes, the assumption is that the resources will be migratable or whatever. So if we basically ship with the TPRs to beta and we say, but it's alpha, is that, it seems to me like it's an issue. Am I complicating this?
Anybody have an answer to that question, whether or not it's an issue?
I don't think it's an issue. I think that at this point, most of the users that are actually using TPR understand that it's going to be deprecated anyway. And I think that we should definitely be really clear and say, we are going to migrate to CRDs and TPR support will go away. But I don't think that we need to migrate it. I think that it sort of holds the status for me of like an experiment, and there are known issues as far as I remember with our implementation of the TPR storage that I don't think it's something that we should try to support in any way, really.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that the beta, we should basically say that the only supported configuration in beta is the etcd?
I would absolutely be in favor of that.
Okay, so can we put a note there that basically it's not, I don't think it's a to-do, but we should basically say what supported configs are for beta.
Agree.
Okay, I'm gonna, so first of all, sorry. Does anyone disagree that we should make etcd the only officially supported storage backend for beta 1?
If you're okay with that from a Microsoft perspective, that's fine with me.
That is okay for a beta 1 from Microsoft perspective. Any objections? Okay. I will mention that Microsoft would like CRD support in a future beta before GA.
Is that a Freudian slip, Aaron?
Yeah, we'd like CPR. No. Yeah, we would like CRD support before GA, but it's not necessary to have it in beta 1. Okay, so we've got a consensus there on the storage backend. Doug, you are next up in the queue, so go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, so I blame Vile for this because he's the one that reminded me of something, and he opened the door to open up issues for possible beta. So one thing I was wondering about is the migration of pod preset to initializers and the move of the repo to be under our, or move of the code to be under our repo. Is that something that we need to do for beta or not? I'm assuming it probably isn't required for beta, but then I'm kind of wondering is, did we make any promises to anybody in terms of the timeline for that?
I have promised many people that they will not be getting anything to do with pod preset.
No, I just meant like the migration of it from where it is today to our stuff, because that was part of the agreement, right?
No promises have been made for that. And I guess we could be I think we should be very clear and say that we might have pod preset migrated by then. We might not. And we definitely won't be migrating your data no matter what.
Okay, so then we may want to add that to, I don't even know if we have an issue for it yet, but we should at least have an issue if we don't have one already, and maybe add it to the list someplace as might be nice kind of a thing, someplace, just so people can see the full list.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I believe there is an issue already. That's
okay, cool.
Yeah. Paul, can you make sure that PR for removing pod presets is in there? I don't remember if it is or not.
In the scope?
Yep.
It is.
Issue. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay, Niall, you are next up in the
Wait, hold on a second.
Okay.
Paul, you said the PR is in scope.
It is in the document of the scope, and the PR to remove the pod preset integration has actually been merged.
No. Okay,
there's another
that's
facet. What you're asking about is and I was going to write an action item for this, is document that if we have pod preset migrated to basically grant nice to have status to a pod preset that's migrated into our API server and uses initializers.
Okay, right. Can we get that added to issue 1098 as a nice to have a line item in there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I misunderstood you, Doug. Okay. Doug, was that it from you?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Alrighty. Niall, go ahead. You're next up.
Yeah, I might be wrong, but from what I understand, the plan on Kubernetes side is to remove pod preset support. And if we don't migrate them, I suppose that the support for pod preset will be just removed. I'm not sure or just being kept in alpha, but I think the plan was to move it completely because the discussion started with like, can we make it better? And I think the decision was not, they can't. And I don't know. I mean, like, will they actually wait until we implement the pod preset before removing? Or is it our responsibility to remove this feature from Kubernetes core? How does it work?
I think Sunil's day job is doing that. I tell you what, why don't we put this on the next design meeting agenda and we can talk about it in detail. I believe he's already got a plan and a lot more specifics than I do.
Can someone take an action item to put it on the next on tomorrow's or later and get Sunil to come
I will do it. And honestly, if if it disappears completely and it comes back in a later beta of service catalog, that's fine. Alpha has the lack of guarantees around it to facilitate that kind of thing. So that's not the end of the world at all.
Okay, so Paul, just to confirm, you're going to put an item to discuss this for tomorrow or later, and you're going to get Sunil to come to that meeting.
Currently doing that, yeah.
Okay, great. And also, Paul, you're up next in the speaker queue, so when you're ready, go ahead and take the floor.
I think your technology has failed you. You should have put the speaker cube written in ash on the wall of your cave, as your forefathers did.
Okay.
Pen and
I
paper
will skip
business,
you then.
Newfangled pen and paper letting you down.
I will skip you then. So the last item then under the proposal for beta is check-in proposals. So since this is still your item, Paul, can you explain what you mean by check-in proposals when you are ready?
Yeah. I think that it's very productive to work through design proposals as pull requests that get checked in. I think a valid point that has been raised is that in Kubernetes we check them in and that's it. They're more of like a record of this is what we did before we started coding, and then nothing happens to them. So I would be fine with checking them in and going back and adding to the proposal, this is where it was implemented, so that you can get some closure on it. But like, I also think it would be good to avoid meta process discussion. I'm really mostly concerned about getting the work done rather than doing it in just the right way.
Okay, so we have 7 minutes left. This will be the last item we discuss today. So for those who have items next up, I will move you to the beginning of discussions tomorrow. And with that, Doug, you have item in the speaker queue, so go ahead, take the floor.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, as Paul was alluding to, this is going to be a rat hole issue, so I'd rather save it for another discussion, or another day, actually. And just in the meantime, I know I guess it was last week, we agreed that it'd be nice to try to make sure people include documentation in their PRs, but it's going to be a really hard requirement because they don't have that baseline yet. So just as best you can on existing PRs, document what's going on. But in the meantime, let's save the broader discussion about how to handle proposals, whether they're checked in or not, for a different time.
Okay. So I've heard two of you guys now say that we're not going to tackle how to present proposals right now in general, but during the development period from now until beta 1, we're going to try to check in design docs and proposals with implementation PRs. Is that accurate?
Well, you said design docs and proposal. I just meant documentation for the feature gets added.
Okay.
The phrasing design docs or proposals wasn't quite accurate.
Right. Okay. So we're going to try to document implementations that we do from now until beta 1.
Right. Yep, as best we can, yes.
As best we can, yeah. Is that accurate? Does anybody disagree with that?
I think it would be very helpful if somebody would volunteer to establish a healthy baseline for documentation. Preferably somebody who was not also going to be accountable for writing code.
So we have had that discussion in the past. If we are going to continue that discussion, I would suggest that we discuss first getting that baseline into the scope of beta 1. And we'll do that discussion at another time because we can't really finish that in 5 minutes. Is that acceptable to you, Paul?
It is more than acceptable. It is sufficiently adequate.
All right. So consensus for the checking in proposals is that we are not going to check in just proposals. Instead, for the beta 1 implementation period, I can't spell, we are going to add documentation to PRs as best we can. We'll revisit after we ship beta 1. Okay. Doug, thank you for trying to find the time. Understood that you can't promise yet. I too will try to find some time to add docs. It's actually something that I'm going to have to do on a couple fronts internally at Microsoft anyway. So Doug, I'll reach out to you and maybe we can coordinate something.
Sounds good.
Beyond that, I see, Paul, in your shared screen of me that my tongue is out. That looks really attractive. And beyond that, we've got 3 minutes left. We're not really going to be able to cover anything else in that time. So we'll get 3 minutes back. It's my small gift to all of you. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.